Hi, everybody. Just as people are joining, welcome. As a reminder, I'm Robin Anselmi of Conversant. I'm joined today by founder Mickey Connolly. We also have a special guest with us, Liz Cole, Chief Human Resource Officer from Marsh. Emma Rose Connolly is also here with us to help moderate the chat. So we're just going to give everybody a minute or two to join in. While we're doing that, we'd love to hear from you in the chat. What's one word to describe how you're feeling today? And so we'd love to hear that. Oh, and I'm always curious where people are in the world. So if you want to put that in, that would be great as well. And again, we'll get started in just a minute. Mickey, how are you today? What's your one word for today?
Oh. Interested.
Interested. Liz, what about you? What's your one word for today?
Happy.
Happy.
To be with all of you.
I love hearing a happy in the midst of all this.
I haven't said that very often to answer that question.
Awesome. Emma Rose, what's your word for today?
I might actually have to steal Judy's that she just put in the chat, which is hopeful-strated.
That is hysterical. That's the best.
Hopeful-strated?
Hopeful-strated. I'm writing that down.
Awesome. My word for today, interested. I'm really excited about participating in this conversation. I'm also, frankly, just damn delighted to have Liz Cole here. You are one of my favorite people, so nice to have you.
Right back at you, baby.
So for those of you who are just joining, Liz Cole, CHRO of Marsh. Liz, you're joining us from Manhattan, is that right?
I am, yes.
Right.
Unfortunately, COVID central here, but yes.
Yes. I'm sure the streets are still eerily quiet up there in New York.
Yes, except for at 7 p.m., which is the best time of day when everybody screams and cheers and claps out their windows for all of the first responders and all the people at the front lines. It's an amazing thing to hear every day. Yeah.
Well, welcome everyone. Thank you for joining again in the chat. If you'll tell us what's one word for you for the day and where you're joining us from. Today's community gathering conversation is on authenticity, which we believe is the heart of true leadership. I think a good place to start, oh wait, sorry. Emma Rose is going to be moderating the chat for us today. I totally forgot. Emma Rose is going to be moderating the chat for us today. Please put in questions or comments that you have about authenticity or anything that we're discussing, and she will help to make sure that those get into the conversation at the right moment. So sorry about that. So we are going to talk about authenticity, and we thought a good place to start was with our definition of it, because I think perhaps we use a slightly more expansive definition than some others. Mickey, what would you say about our definition of authenticity, particularly relative to leadership?
Well, from our perspective, authenticity is being true to yourself, others, and the facts of life. So having a true relationship to self, to others, and the facts of life is really challenging. It's not the same thing as just burping up what's on my mind honestly. And those of you who've worked with us for a long time, we say that's the difference between a sincere reaction and a genuine place to stand. So authenticity is about being true, not only telling the truth.
And I think in that, one of the important parts is true to self, relevant to what's happening, and relevant to others. And so, Liz, you are a very busy woman. At all times, let alone in the midst of all that's happening in the world right now. What about this conversation and this topic was interesting enough for you to give us a few hours of your time to talk about it?
Well, it's probably more the people than it is the topic, because you guys could talk to me about why you chose to put that cow picture in your background, and I'd be like, yep, I'm here, I'm ready for you. And there's something behind that, and that is, you know, right now, and I think all the time, but really especially right now, I crave trusting environments and truth tellers And, you know, I just also know that you and the broader community out there, even the people that we haven't had the pleasure of meeting because we've been in different groups, you know, we've only met maybe 15 or so people in this, but I just kind of have this feeling always that we all are in each other's corner. Having gone through what we've gone through at Conversant, there's just this, I don't know, kind of a love that we have for one another and what we've been through. And so knowing that there's somebody that wants something better for us by helping us be better, I want to be a part of that.
That's great. You know, I think in that is sort of the heart of authenticity, right? I sort of try to stay away from the cliches about authenticity, things like being my best self, right? Because I think that has gotten to be sort of trite. So
Yeah.
for you, what would you say that's slightly different than that around the work you've done personally on authenticity?
You know, for me, I guess sometimes it's about owning up to what might be your dark side or what might be things that you struggle with, but saying it sometimes out loud. I think you guys taught me this thing about leading out loud. So, you know, even when I'm having to deal with things that aren't particularly fun or quite hard, I think sometimes even with my team, I try and be as honest as I can about what I'm going through, but then how do I see it through such that I can do my job in a way that's the most effective way to do my job. So I don't want to hide it. I don't want to sort of push it down. I want to acknowledge perhaps the feelings around it, but at the same time say, but here's how we're going to address it. Here's how we're going to deal with it. Or I need help addressing it. I don't exactly know how we're going to get through this. So what do you know, what ideas do we have? That's one way that I think I try to be authentic. And I think another way that I try very hard to lead is to eliminate the fear, is to pull away the fear from things. And when you give people permission to like just try something, knowing that it's, you know, like I say, oftentimes we have a batting average, right? If we get 1 in 3 things right, or do it well, then we're doing well. And when you're creating, you know, making mistakes and learning from that and iterating your way through is the better way to create. But when you do it that way, I hope anyway that it pulls the fear out of working together. And so that to me feels like a more authentic way to lead.
Liz, you've really stimulated some things for me that I think are really potent. One of them is, when you're talking about living out loud, as you know, we have this rule for ourselves that if it occurs to you 3 times, you have to find a way to put it in the conversation.
Yeah.
It's an anti-suppression device, the 3 times rule. However, how do you put it in? Because we say that authenticity is the truth as an act of service. You're out to connect to people. And if you're being truthful out loud, it creates an opportunity for others to contribute. The way you were just talking. Because if I'm just walking around with it like, oh, wait a minute, I'm supposed to be the boss, which means I'm not supposed to have this thing go wrong, so I have to act some way. Yeah. I'm actually robbing the power of the community to deal with our biggest challenges. Yeah, yeah. And you're so right. And for me, the challenge is always getting to a position of authenticity versus sincerity. So even if I'm sharing something that's my feelings, frankly, I don't mean to get political at all, but I just going through this with Governor Cuomo, I really appreciate the fact that he says, I'm just going to tell you the facts, and then I'm going to tell you my opinion. And so when we're honest and when we're open, I think we have to be clear that what we're experiencing from a feeling perspective is one thing, but it may not be the truth. What you said about the facts of life, you know, this is an interior thing that I'm feeling, but where we then have to get to is what's the intersection of what makes sense in the best interest of everybody, if that makes any sense at all.
Well, I think where people often get into trouble, and I think that example is really great, is that they confuse their sincere opinion with being authentic, right? And I think what we're saying is, and your example there is, well, actually, let's start with what do we know to be true from a fact basis that we all actually can mutually observe and agree upon, right? As a starting place for that conversation. And then how do I feel about it? And how do you feel about it, right? So actually starting with what we know to be true in that conversation. And unfortunately, a lot of leaders at all levels actually start with their opinion about things, which makes it really easy for us to sort of go down a different path in that conversation.
Yeah, so true. And, one of the things that I do remember from, going back to Conversant, and by the way, guys, I went 2013 and I still to this day use something from it every day. Every day I pull something from it, and it's 7 years later. But when I find myself getting worked up about something or annoyed about something, when I can remember, you remember with that exercise that you do when you feel it in somewhere, you have to come to terms with where you feel it. Do you feel it in your heart area or your lungs, or do you feel it in your stomach? And then you can begin to have the conversation about what is really upsetting me at this point, and more often than not, I find that when I get upset, it's so much about the ego. And if I can really begin to get clear about that, then again, I can go back to but what's working about this situation? What's good about this? Or how can I listen to this person differently, to understand what they're really trying, what they're fighting for, or whatever the case may be. But that is something that I just, the physical manifestation of when you start to get upset is a triggering event to right yourself.
Liz, when we talk about this authenticity as being true to self, others, and the facts of life, what you just said reminds me that one of the things that's a powerful challenge, and the days that I'm equal to it, I'm better at having authenticity be the way things are, is I think if you're going to host an authentic conversation, you've got to give up the right to be offended.
Jeez. Forget it then. It's not worth it.
And that's the ego conversation that you're talking about. That's
oh my God, really? You have to give up the right
to be offended. For me to have the truth really come out. Because often when I'm offended, there's some mismatch between what's true for another and for me. And instead of researching it, I just get annoyed.
Yeah.
I have mastered annoyance. I need no more practice at it.
I'm writing this down.
I still keep working on it.
That's amazing.
Well, Mickey, I think one of the things that's just really stark about that right now is that as leaders, particularly the more senior you are in an organization, being able to master that is so critical, because the truth will not emerge if you are going to react to it. People are going to be much more hesitant to tell you the things you need to know. As our dear friend Jim Matroni likes to say, the higher up in the organization you go, the better your ideas suddenly become, the funnier your jokes are, right? People are not willing to speak the truth, and I think it's because they're worried about you being offended. So you've actually got to really create authenticity in an organization beyond yourself. You have to let go of that offense that all of us sort of portray to allow the truth to emerge. And I'd love for us to talk about, particularly in these times, because I think, authenticity is not rainbows and unicorns and everybody being happy every moment. There are lots of things happening right now, particularly as we're speaking, that people are not happy about, right? That we have messages we have to convey to employees that require honesty and transparency. And I've gotten a lot of questions around, well, how do we do that how do we know what to disclose? How do we know how much information to give? And particularly when we are fearful of people's reactions to that. So I'd love for either one of you to just comment on what are you seeing and noticing about that?
I've been through, I guess, if you think about the world financial crisis now, and I learned a lot going through that, and then now this, but it never pays off to not treat your people like adults. It never pays off to believe people can't handle the truth. It's just not a good strategy. We don't have to scare people, but I think less information scares people more than more information, right? Context is good. And especially if you're delivering challenging news, bad news, whatever you want to call it, but you're delivering it with a sense of, we got this, we'll find it. It's going to be hard, but we're going to get through it together. And I need you. I need you. I mean, I think one of the things I said on a call the other day, we have these webcasts with our entire company. And one of the things that I said about connecting, and Robin, we might have talked about this as well, is, it's not just about having happy hours. I mean, those are fabulous and everything, and having, shared yoga time or, but connection, and especially for leaders right now, is making sure that every single person on your team deeply knows that they matter to you and to that team and to the business and what's going on. People need to have a real sense of purpose and meaning, and knowing that what they do really, really matters deeply. So as a leader, I think, because I think all of us on this call probably are, I just really want to draw your attention to that make sure that every single person that you check in with knows that you're totally counting on them, because that's what's going to make people have a sense of comfort right now.
That Liz, earlier in a conversation before we were in this one, we were talking about the truth loves company.
Yeah. Yeah.
It really is a source of coherence and connectivity, even if not comfort and happiness, because sometimes the truth is not what I would have selected, and yet it remains true. But the way you're talking keeps having the sense of potential community in it, of being smarter together than separately. I don't know if y'all noticed in the chat that Jim said something about how does authenticity affect being open to the ideas of others, especially when they're nowhere like mine. And that's the place where we have a chance to be smarter together. Can we trust the truth as an investment in the creativity of other people? And then when they say something different than what I would have said or thought, do I comprehend it before I try to change it? And
Yeah.
I can think of 30 examples easily of where a moment like that, somebody was a source of intelligence that was escaping me individually.
Mickey, I've said this a number of times, but somebody from my team from many years ago, when I went to Conversant, is on the line. So, hey, Sandy. And I will never forget this, but when you guys taught me that the difference between listening to understand and listening to learn, and when you put it into practice, I said, overnight, my team became brilliant. It's amazing. And when I really do that, you find the brilliance, and you find something that you can build on versus something that needs correcting. Yeah. It's a very, very different thing,
Well, one of the things inside of that I think is interesting is that when we are being authentic, can we separate out and make distinctions between purpose and method and outcome, right? Because I think often we get in these debates that are really around method, right? So this is back to Jim's question about, can I really be open to others? And I think a lot of times where that debate comes in is like my way versus your way. And I think part of this is, can I be true to the things that are actually a shared purpose for all of us, that we're all in together? And in these moments, Liz, you and I were talking about this the other day around what makes leading authentically actually slightly simpler, not easy, but simpler in moments like this, is that there is a shared purpose that everybody's acting on. So I don't know if you want to just comment a little bit about that, because we had a really interesting conversation about it the other day.
Yeah, I think the genesis of it was we were talking about how leading in this crisis, and there's so much that's being out there written about it. My dog is playing with the roller thing, if you hear that in the background, so sorry about that. She's having to entertain herself these days a lot. But we were talking about how there's all this stuff about it's difficult this is such a difficult time for businesses and difficult for leaders and stuff. And I think actually leading during crisis is easier than leading in normal times. And maybe easy is not the right word, but in a way, I kind of am going to go ahead and use easy, because the focus that you get, the attention that you get, the clarity that you have in times of crisis is not something that is normally around or available when we don't have things like this that we're all sharing together or having to deal with. And so I think the challenge then is, how do you take what makes leading right now easy and move that into normal times? How do you take that sense of purpose, that sense of clarity, that, like we're only going to focus on a few things and do it really, really well, and we're all going to align on why it's the right thing to do, so that when I'm not looking, you're still doing the right thing. This notion of having to supervise other people just goes completely away, because we're all in it and completely aligned. I hope that's what you were sort of referring to that conversation.
I think the question, Liz, about how do we take what calls us to be operating at our highest and best self during a crisis, how does that migrate into ordinary times? I think when the crisis is obvious, we're willing to give up our ego we were talking about earlier. We've got very dear friends who had to deal with fires and floods in Australia, for instance, who always talk about in their various organizations there that's when people come together and they are doing the right thing and they're giving up anything remotely selfish for something that's crucial to everybody. There's still something, even in ordinary times, we can stop and ask ourselves, what is truly important right now? And can I separate my reactions from that so that I have a choice? Is my reaction helping what's truly important right now?
Mm-hmm.
And if I can't get to that right away, I need to ask somebody else.
Mm-hmm.
The three of us were talking earlier about times when you absolutely require other people, because I get a little messed up and my own thinking is flawed. But I know that where I am, what I'm saying, what I'm doing is not forwarding whatever is truly important. And I have to take a breath and bring it to, as we would say where I grew up, bring it to y'all. And somebody is going to see. I find we are not all messed up at the same time. That there's always somebody smarter than my deep dysfunction. And so in the moment that my egos run amok or my reactions aren't helping what matters most, can I bring the challenge to a larger group of people and give them a chance to make things better? To me, it's virtually inevitable that they do.
I think in some ways it's almost counterintuitive to folks, right? That authenticity actually requires others to truly live it, right? So, because I think otherwise I am just a pile of my reactions, right? If I don't actually have a reference outside of myself, right? And so in times like this, that outside reference is so clear, Liz, right? So I think what you're saying, like that outside reference of like what we are here to do together becomes crystal clear. And so how in organizations can we do that more reliably in moments when the situation and the circumstances haven't enabled it, right? And so in organizations, the reason it's not clear often is my opinion or my agenda and Mickey's and Emma Rose's and yours are all competing, right, for space and resources. So how do we bring like that? I think authenticity is really, as a leader, how do we bring that clarity for people into the organization for the things that we are standing for to help us resolve those issues?
I know in McKinsey, one of the distinctions they use in the evolution of their own leaders is the notion of superordinate purpose. For us, we've talked about it as a senior purpose or as an essential purpose, something that we all stand inside of and care about and are willing to serve. And I think that's true. That's another thing about in good times or bad, stress or not, the more clear that senior purpose is, the easier it is for us to take a breath and go, okay, if I was a person who was committed to that, what would he do now?
Right. I was going to say something.
From ego to service.
Yeah. And I mean, just very tactically, one way, Robin, that came to mind when you were talking about how do we get back to that? And when we all have, these different agendas and things that we're trying to drive and we get frustrated because, mine, of course, is the most important, is to, I think anyway, to look up and look at what the person above you is really needing and what's important to them and what's driving their agenda, and then maybe the person above that. And it's so amazing how one conversation can really adjust your feelings and your beliefs around something because you've got this different context. And so if you're struggling and you don't feel like that your agenda is getting the attention or something, maybe there's a bit of context that's needed to say, well, how can I better align to the person that's above me that has a bigger responsibility, more things to manage, way more levers that they've got to be pulling and worrying about. How can I make sure that it's easier on her or him then harder and more complicated.
Well, the other thing I might add to that is like up or out, right? Because the other place to turn to for that might be customers or clients as well. Like, so how do we make, or for those in the nonprofit realm, the supporters, donors,
Right.
On behalf of, right? So I think it really is for those of us that are in for-profit organizations, we are here to serve some group of people, right? So whether that's organizationally higher than us or out from us, right? Like what is it that actually aligns with what we're there to do together with whoever that outside customer might be.
Yeah.
Nick, you're going to say something else?
I think there's a passage from one of Robert Frost's poems where he says, I wake up as a miserable little clod of ailments and grievances, complaining that the world is not devoted to making me happy. That's not often.
I woke up that way this morning.
And when I lose, and morose too, right? When I lose access to that higher purpose, to use that term, I often regain it in conversation with you, with others. And there are times I know where I've been the one that hasn't completely lost my mind for other people. It reminds me of that passage from Kipling where he talks about the strength of the pack is in the wolf and the strength of the wolf is in the pack.
Wow.
We really
That's
need
very
one
cool.
another. And I think authenticity is far more an act of service fueled by community intelligence than it is an individual act of candor.
That's great.
Mickey, I don't know where this question's going to go. But the thing that's on my mind is like, sometimes that's easy. It's easy for people who are senior in an organization to be really authentic, right? Like to sort of stand for the things they stand for. What about folks in the organization who are worried about the judgment of who they are or what they stand for authentically, who don't have positional authority to just be able to stand for it? How do we as leaders create space for diversity in the organization? Because I think that's a big part of helping people to really bring authenticity to our conversations. What would either one of you say about that in the final minute or two here?
I'll be very brief because I want to listen to Mickey more than talk. I go back to the only way, the easiest way for me to ever be as inclusive as I can and hear that is listen to learn. Just really look for what is brilliant about or important to this person about why they're taking the position that they're taking,
I think as a person who has position power, a brilliant question to bother yourself with it, I think can unlock learning from the other Liz. If I understood that, Robin, how do we create the room for other people to be safe enough to be open? Is what contribution is this person attempting to make? Because that requires me to learn something beyond my own reaction to their first 4 words. What's the contribution this person is attempting to make? What are they trying to make better? And I think it often reveals things that otherwise get obscured.
And
I also think it's helpful to work with people to know that the more they can put what's different about us in service of what we both care about, the easier it is to get somebody to listen to what you're saying. So if you create a purpose-rich context, I have something to say. It's not what I've heard others say, and I'm saying it because I care about ABC. And the ABC is something that people go, yeah, I care about it too. All right, well, let me tell you what I have to say that I haven't heard anybody else say, and it's only because I care about that. So, Robin, that's my final answer.
And Liz, I know you have something to add, and we are bumping up at time. It's amazing how fast 30 minutes can go.
That's crazy.
I just have to say thank you, Liz Cole from CHRO at Marsh, for joining us from Manhattan in the midst of all of the chaos that you are literally in the middle of. These conversations, I really can't believe how fast it goes. I would have loved to have another 30 minutes with the two of you.
authentic pleasure. So
Thank you.
thank you for the opportunity.
Thanks everybody for joining us. Just a reminder, the recordings will be made available. Please feel free to forward those to anybody that you think would benefit from them. Join us next week when we talk about wonder and how we believe wonder is going to be the crux of the matter as we move forward. So thanks again for everyone being here and joining us, and stay safe, wash your hands.
Bye-bye, everybody.